In a world overflowing with distractions, we seek meaning. How do we transform ambition into something deeper, into true fulfillment? I'm Sam Pepin, CEO of Corcentrica, and I've spent years helping businesses succeed by connecting their goals to something bigger. On the Meaningful podcast, we explore not just how to win in business, but how to grow as individuals. Through conversation with thought leaders, innovators, and everyday heroes, we uncover the stories that drive us towards something greater. Whether you're striving for success, seeking purpose, or just looking for the next steps in your journey, this podcast is your guide to navigating the intersection of ambition, growth, and meaning. So please join me and our incredible guests as we redefine what's possible in both business and life. Enjoy. The greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence, it is to act with yesterday's logic. Welcome to the Meaningful Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Pepin. Today we're diving into how to adopt the Changeformational mindset, identifying the formula for success in talent development, and learning how to build a lasting legacy through mutual accountability. Our guest today is Dr. Jeffrey Magee, a global speaker and best-selling author of 36 books on leaderships and talent developments. With more than 40 years of experience, he has served as a C-suite executive and currently publishes Performance P360 Magazine. Dr. Magee works with top business owners and military leaders to significantly increase organizational effectiveness by mastering the Changeformational mindset. If you enjoyed this discussion, please let the world know with a like, a small review, or even a quick share. This supports how more people find meaningful content just like this. Mr. Dr. Jeffrey Magee, welcome on the Meaningful Podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, and thank you, and thank your listeners for the opportunity to have a conversation here.
Well, it's fantastic to have you. Obviously, you're a good friend of mine, and we've been now, I suppose, having a professional relationship for certainly a few years, basically seeing each other basically ins and outs. But to kick us off, Jeffrey, tell us more about jeffreymagee.com.
Great question. So jeffreymagee.com is a talent development firm. We work with corporations globally, and we come in and zero in on leadership and sales. That's our space. Leadership Institute, Sales Institute, to make it real fast and short.
Nice. Beautiful. And I really want to obviously come back to the sort of the origin of all of this, because you're a man of a very, very, very lengthy history. I'll put it this way.
Thank you.
And so the origins of changeformational thinkers, I think, which is so fascinating and quite a deep topic. But obviously you come from youth. Excuse me.
That book right there, Changeformational.
There we go. Changeformational. And you really need to nail the pronunciation, because Changeformational is a great mix of two beautiful words.
Brilliant.
But, yeah, exactly. And from youth entrepreneurships to military educations to 5,000 basically speaking engagements, I suppose from your perspective, what drives someone to master performance at scale?
Great question. So early on, what I started to realize is life is simply a formula. No matter what it is you do, no matter where you are that you're doing it, everything is a formula. So whether it's cooking or whether it's astronomy and anything in between. And so what you have to recognize is whoever you are and wherever you want to go, there's a formula that someone has already learned, figured out. They've already done all the hard work to get from starting point to end point. So what you want to be able to do, if you want to be a practitioner within any organization, or if you want to be the breakout entrepreneur that creates new space, is what are the formulas that work and how do you make them better or faster or different or more cost effective, more efficient? And every time I hear a story of someone who's phenomenal and great, where I lean in is, what's the formula that they have figured out? Within that, I have two firms, as you referenced, my talent development firm, jeffreymagee.com. It was over 30 years in business. We've designed actually a lot of professional development curriculum that's used globally by major training firms. Thousands of professional speakers and trainers have actually learned my content and use it, whether they realize it or not, from 36 books and 4 college textbooks in 21 languages and etc. to a media company. So I also have a second firm called Professional Performance Magazine. It's been out for about 34 years. And so every quarter we get phenomenal personalities to write articles for us, for our readers. And it's the same thing. So Sam, what I started realizing is that everything is a formula. Whether it's Sir Richard Branson and I've written a couple of books together, and he writes for my magazine off and on for over 30 years almost. And it's interesting when you look at him, he has started multiple businesses from zero to $1 billion status. And each one he has started really had no connection to the previous company because he's figured out there's a formula. Where you look at the two cousins that created a company here in North America called Crumble Cookies, and they quickly realized Crumble is the parent corporate name. They dropped the word cookie, and now they're into multiple different spaces, and it's a formula. They went into the cookie space. It's kind of like you wouldn't think there's much room left there, and they niched out a $2 billion business where someone already was. So again, from the talent development side, where I've worked as an employee, worked my way up through into the executive offices and owned several medium-sized businesses, meaning hundreds of employees, to my magazine, it's always about a formula. You're in Canada and I'm in the United States, and a lot of businesses may appear to be different just because there's a line that divides two countries, but at the end, it's the same. And that one same is what I focus on, and that is your people power. The talent, unleash the talent. I mean, you can have a building, I can have a building. You can have a product, I can have a product. The only differential on this planet is the talent that's on your payroll versus the talent that's on someone else's. That's the lesson.
Interesting. So that's the formula?
That's it. And so within that, there's lots of formulas. So there's one formula I have called the Player Capability Index Model. It's kind of really a foundational item that I use in our Leadership Institute to help people to understand how to look at someone objectively and take all emotion and personal views out of it, and look at a person to determine what's their mental DNA, what's the talent that they can leverage and bring to the team. A formula called the Player Capability Index Model you can use if you're scoping out a job description, because you can use it to write a job description. You can use it to interview people. I share with people that say, hey, I'm not good at networking and social events. I say, well, you can use the exact same formula, because the letters in this formula give you phenomenal ways to have conversations. So it's not just mindless dribble and chit chat that people tend to get sucked into. I mean, you go to an F1 race and you have the opportunity to bump into tons of people. Well, if you have a formula in your head that tells you this is really the DNA of a human being through my kind of professional lens, and you started thinking of the categories in this formula, you would ask different questions of that person you're bumping into, and you'd end up having a significantly more meaningful conversation. And who knows where that's going to go. So that's an example of it. And when I look at sales, the same thing. I'll study the most successful salespeople in an industry to identify what's the commonalities, what's the common traits, what's the common DNA of successful salespeople. And again, I've written about this in a lot of my books, college textbooks and sales books, and I've identified that in sales, no matter what profession you're in, there are very specific, certain variables that everyone in sales must do to be successful. Now, you can take the word success and define it a lot of ways. Success meaning I hit my sales goal. Well, I always challenge people to say I hit my sales goal, and I go, but wait a second. That's just the first goal. You hit your sales goal and you slowed down then for that day, that week, that month, that quarter, that year. What was all the business that you missed? Who are all the people that could have benefited from what you have to offer that you never connected with, and they don't know you exist? So again, we've created a planet of mediocrity is actually the reality where we find ourselves today. I mean, again, here in North America, Gallup did a survey recently, and while it doesn't get a lot of play, I find it not only to be very true, and as I walk the planet and I see people at work, I would say this model is pretty doggone accurate. And what they found after surveying thousands of businesses. So you as a listener, think about that for a second. You know, Sam and I, as we interact with our clients, if our client is one person and they were surveyed, that's one person. But if we interact with a client that in their place, they have 12 employees or 1,200 employees or 12,000 employees, then that survey was of businesses. So that might have been thousands of people at one time. And so that's why I think the survey is so powerful, Sam. And what they found was three numbers. Roughly 56% of the people that were surveyed said they're disengaged in a workplace. Call it anything you want, disengaged, complacent, you know, they're racing to the bottom. What's the minimum I can do and still keep my job? You know, why apply more? And so that's a leadership challenge. We need to engage someone to get them to step in, step up, and step forward, or show them how to step out of here, because that toxicity can kill a whole organization. But then 15% of people in the survey said, and here's what becomes alarming. These people are actually getting paid every day. 15% of people responded and said they're actively disengaged. These are people that every day get up, and to be blunt, which is probably going to make some of your listeners mad, which is perfect. That's by design as a shrink. I like to play with people's brains and see who stays focused. But 15% of people get up every day and do nothing but bitch and complain. They look for something to complain about. So that leaves you 29% of the people doing all the work on any given day. So if you can find a way to incite the 29% more, find more than 29%, hire more than 29%, unleash that 29%, then they will start to help you to curb that 56% of neutral people to step in and step up. And so now you have even more productive. Again, we talk about culture a lot of the time. Culture,
Yes.
again, a lot of definitions, but the reality is you can say you've got a great culture. Well, I'm going to throw a BS flag on the playing field most often. Even if you say you have a great culture, let's go in and analyze, is that 56, 15, and 29 present in your organization? And a lot of times it's yes. So again, I'm on LinkedIn a lot. I don't participate in all the social media, Facebook dribble that's migrated to LinkedIn, but there's a lot of great posts that what I will do sometimes is I will make a comment on it and I will frame it as a business case study without getting into the politics of left, right, or center, or whatever. I'll say, look what you've just read or seen and put it into business context. Would you tolerate that in your business? Would you hire an employee that just did that? Would you keep someone on your payroll that does that? Because when you put it in business speak, I've never met an entrepreneur, a business owner, a serious executive that would ever say, yes, I'm going to keep the 15% and the 56% gladly. They would say, no way, they're gone. So
Right.
powerful question.
It is. No, it is. It is certainly. And one thing about you, Jeffrey, that I always really admire, and I actually told you that multiple times on a personal basis also, is that you lived so many lives, right? You're a very youthful entrepreneur, Fortune 100 basically leader, military educator, which I think is sort of a portion that you sort of talk less, but it's still very significant. Obviously, author of not I think 350 books. I mean, it's ridiculous how many books
36
you have.
books and going. Working on 2
That's
more
right.
now.
That's exactly right. Publisher. I mean, for you, what threads ties it all together, I suppose? What keeps you perhaps redefine the boundaries and being upfront of this sort of line of just, you know what, we can be more, we can accomplish more, perhaps, and pushing not only others but yourself to be able to accomplish such things, I think is quite extraordinary. Tell me more about all of that.
Great question. And thank you for that kind of macro overview. So I would respond by using the word legacy as the answer to your question. Legacy. I mean, if each one of us got up every day and realized that someone with a video camera is going to follow your every move for that 24-hour cycle. And at the end of the day, you basically were called upstairs. Your life at this level on this planet is done, and you're going upstairs. That videotape would be what would appear on your tombstone. If someone walked into the cemetery and saw your name, they would see a little pop-up screen and it would play. What did you accomplish on that day? How did you gift it forward with anyone and everyone that you could have, yourself included? So whether it's personal or professional in nature, there was a poem that was written many years ago by a young lady called The Dash. And I'd encourage all of your listeners, if they're not familiar with that, Google it and just kind of read it. The Dash basically says that, you look at the date on the headstone of when someone arrived on this planet and when they departed. And those dates are not as meaningful as the dash in between. What did you do? What did you learn? What did you contribute? Whether your dash is seconds long or a century long. So when you make that comment about, what ties all together, for me, it's a drive every day to recognize what's my legacy? How do I help others to unlock and unblock their frustrations or disruptions or distractions, the noise around them? We live in a world today with tremendous noise. I mean, we are an example of that in a way, because today anyone with a mouth believes they can be a podcaster. Well, if you don't have subject matter knowledge and some sort of experience and something to gift forward, you shouldn't be opening your mouth. So that takes out about 90% of all the podcasters. And then everyone with fingers thinks that they're a blogger, they're a writer, they're an author. I mean, everyone's writing a book today. And that's great if those words have wisdom. And you can be 2 years of age and have wisdom. You can be 100 years of age and have wisdom. And wisdom is kind of a colliding of knowledge and experiences and applications and common sense. And inside you, how do you put that together and then share it back out with someone else? I mean, sometimes wisdom comes from the most unexpected places. It could be a neighbor. It could be a friend. It could be a family member. It could be someone older, younger, same age, same ethnicity, same gender, or different. Doesn't matter. So what ties it together is I use the word legacy. Again, you as a business leader, what's your legacy you want to leave as your footprint as an organization, as a business, as a product, as a deliverable? If you are in the services industry, it's still the same thing. What's your legacy? If you're a manager leader, how do you grow and develop people? That's your legacy. What will people say about you 20 years later? Those sort of comments. So great question you've posed. There's a lot of ways that I and others could answer how do you tie it together. Whether it's drive, whether it's my commitment, whether it's my purpose, whether it's my why. I mean, a lot of those are key words, but it really does come back down to what's the legacy you live. If you're a parent, you have children, your children are your legacy. Are they going out and making the planet better? Are they just keeping it going, which that's fine? Or are they actually a negative sign? It's kind of like math. Do you plus sign everyone every day? Or are you a negative sign when you walk in and out?
Right. No, I love this. And for me, when you're talking about legacy, one that I always like to sort of contemplate is I want to leave the planet better than how I found it. Basically, that's sort of the benchmark in which I always use to sort of tread my life. Now, there's people full of wisdom talking about wisdom, like King Solomon, that said, any man should do three things: should plant a tree, should read a book, should have a son. And I think that legacy, like you said, could take multiple vehicles, but within that vehicles, one thing that is the key is perhaps, like you said, how will you be remembered first and foremost? Because very few people will remember outside of people that you actually touch, which is something to keep in mind. I think it was Alex Hormozy having this interesting video about Queen Elizabeth, and the fact that basically we talked about her for at great length when she died for 2, 3, 4 months, and then, like you said, the world moves so fast that it's sort of somewhat vanished to the people in which are not directly involved within it. So I think that degree of proximity is so important. In talking about that degree of proximity, basically, Jeffrey, you talk a lot about the power of intellectual property, right? Specifically in human capital. And I quote you on this, but I think it's quite important. Ideas alone are cheap, but proven frameworks, that's legacy. You're a system guy, right? You're a guy that, again, you're a formulas person. Now, your curriculum isn't just theory. Obviously, it's been licensed, it's been scaled, it's been taught basically to the biggest seminar and military basically education systems in North America. Now, from your perspective, for those in which perhaps have that dream of being able to accomplish such a feat, what's the secret to be turning knowledge or wisdom perhaps into IP that can actually change behaviors and survive beyond basically the person teaching it within this legacy format?
You've just hit it. And that is right there. What survives beyond you? You talked about King Solomon, have a child. That is, again, what's going to survive beyond you. So for me, again, it is several layers of answers. One, books. What are the books I can write that are truly meaningful and not just more noise into the marketplace? So as I write a book, I write it from a perspective of evergreen. Evergreen meaning I don't want to write something that's so time dated that if someone reads it in a month or in a year or in a decade, it is almost immediately read and seen as, oh, this is outdated. They're referencing something here that's so, so I'm very, very strategic in that. My training programs are, yes, based upon theory, but they're more practicum. They're more practical in basis. And that's what I think really differentiates me from a lot of people, is that when I come in to do a program, whether it's advisory work at the C-suite and business owner level, whether it is leadership development at the leadership level, whatever the organization wants to deem that to be, it is recognizing there's a pathology and a psychology to development. And a lot of people don't get that. So, example, many years ago here in North America, for our global listeners and viewers today, training and development at the professional level really became a major industry. It's not as big in other parts of the world. It is big, but in some places it doesn't even really exist. So it's amazing. But in North America, traditional colleges started realizing they were losing out on millions, hundreds of millions, and billions of dollars because they were just teaching theory. And so companies were hiring business grads, accounting grads, marketing grads, whatever, that didn't really have a way to immediately apply and be a value add in the employment market space. So you had all these talent development training companies. You had major CPA firms like Deloitte started getting into training and development, and McKinsey gets into training and development. You have traditional training houses here in North America like Fred Pryor, Skill Path, Career Track Seminars, of which several of those have bought my curriculum and presented to tens of thousands of people on the planet, with hundreds of trainers have come in. They've taught them my courseware in books and audios and videos and online and learning management systems. But what comes back down to it is that, as you said, so there's a system. So what I recognize about training and development, and I use that backstory as my example and answer to your question, is that for several years, the number one training topic that businesses were finding and looking for someone to come in and train their team on was, and is, how to deal with conflict and confrontation in the workplace, or how to deal with difficult personalities or people in the workplace. And what I realized is that while that topic is essential, it actually is not what businesses should be exposing their team to. Because if you look at pathology and chronology of talent development as a business professional, whatever your title is, entry level, owner, I don't care. Dealing with tough people is like the 5th or 6th module in a sequence. So if you taught the right 1, 2, 3, 4 modules, then you would spend a lot less time worrying about problem players. But the reason everyone keeps focusing on problem players is because no one's doing, or no one is understanding, or no one has the guts to do the 1, 2, 3, 4s first. So when I built out my Leadership Institute, it's basically 1 day a month with an organization on site where they live. And so we have 12 modules and are academically accredited. And we use some of my college textbooks as reinforcement material. We have an online learning management system, and we have assessment tools, and we have coaching. We built it as a cohort, et cetera, et cetera. And so a lot of companies in the last 10 years and even like today are following that exact same formula. Well, I've been doing it for decades. And so you start to recognize what works. And there really are very, very specific ways to grow someone who's incredibly successful to the next level up. That's the buzzword of the day. Or take someone who wants to be successful but says, hey, I don't know what this skill set is. And maybe I haven't worked before. I've got clients, I just came back from a trip from New York City, and I have a client there that says, look, we've just hired, some great interns. They're working for us for first time. This is their first real professional job, and they need help on X, Y, and Z. And as soon as they identify what those needs are through assessment tools, I start smiling because now you're doing it the right way. Find out what people lack and give them those tools. Find out what they have and leverage those tools.
Right.
Developing. And you never stop learning, Sam. That's a critical element. Again, there's great wisdom. Benjamin Franklin had a line that goes to the effect of, the person who empties their purse into their head will never be bankrupt. But a lot of people don't want to keep learning. And you also referenced history a minute ago with the former Queen of England. I want to go back to that one for a second, because that passing comment for not only you and I to remind ourselves, but for our viewers today is critically important. There's a tremendous void on this planet of people that actually have ever studied history. The history of their profession. Go back and who are the great, forgers and frontier professionals in your industry? I mean, who wrote the first books on it? Who were the people that really forged that terrain? Who are the experts today? But also just history in general. There's a lot of very popular. This is not going to go over too good with people right here. So I'm going to be careful I don't set myself up for a lawsuit. But there's a lot of people in the internet world right now that are perceived as the great gospels and gods of coaching and leadership and business. And, oh my gosh, we have to get them to come speak to our organization. We pay them a boatload of money. But they're exciting to people who have never read history. Yes. There's one popular person out there, and every time he posts on LinkedIn, and he's doing a great job because he's drawing attention to the need to develop. But if he ever has an original idea, the next thing we're going to read is that his head blew up and he's dead. All he does is repurpose someone else's classic lines from 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago and presents them almost as if they're his own. And I use that story for this point. Everyone gets excited like, oh my gosh, this person's great. And there is a purpose to represent, but you have to do it with integrity and say, you know what? I've got a friend of mine, Sam, and Sam Patman, here's one of the things that he says. See, reference where the stuff is coming from versus leading people to believe that you're the birthing agent of the idea. History is incredible. We have people today, again, go on social media, make it a college case study just for 1 week and read posts and just ask yourself, is this post rhetoric or fact? Is it misleading or honest? Is it complete BS? Do you have a BS meter in your body that just went right into the red zone when you read and hear things? But Sam, when you said history, it deserves me to go off on a little bit of a tirade because we live in a world today where no one studies the history of their business, their products, their services, their coworkers, their colleagues, their boss, their customers, their neighbors, their elected leaders, et cetera, et cetera. And so you end up with a very powerful adage called the blind leading the blind, and that's going to get you in deep trouble when you start hooking your cart to someone who has no clue, but they look real pretty.
That's it raises so many ideas in my mind when you go on this tangent because, well, the first thing, I'm a big art guy, as you know, and I go to art galleries and museum. I know that I think you're a pretty big fan of contemporary art as well, if I'm not
exactly
mistaken.
Right. I have some nice original pieces.
There we go. And I don't recall who said this, but maybe you will. It was good artists borrow ideas, great ones steal them. And that was very interesting at the time because I sort of didn't understand. And then I saw Newton also, which is the reason why I did so much because I was able to stand on top of giants, basically, shoulders.
And that's the key point. People don't understand, still doesn't mean being disingenuous. It means, wait a second. Where is there something out there on the horizon I can see? Someone has already done that work. How do I build the next castle on that? And if you do a great job, someone's going to come beside you or behind you, and they're going to build a castle on top of your castle. That's exactly how you evolve. That's how you contribute meaningfully to the body of work that's already out there, which goes back to the word legacy and why I write so much. But there's a lot of topics I'm not going to write on because I'm not the subject matter expert. I don't have real world experiences. I don't have real credentials. I don't have real degrees. I don't have real accomplishments. I don't have any IP, intellectual property in that space. But there's a lot of people, back to your statement of skill, because that's a powerful adage. And I mean, I've heard it many times over the years from other people, just as you have. But sometimes what people do is they hijack your intellectual property and they do it very disingenuously as if they birthed it and they created it. And that's not right. That's not right. And the problem is that there's some people, they can get away with that because we lack accountability in our society today. And that's one of the things I talk a lot about, accountability in our leadership programs and in sales and in general.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think you're right. There's a distinction there that is very, very worthy. And because to me, and the way you're pronouncing it as well, I think we're definitely on the same page. There's actually nothing wrong whatsoever to actually, I recommend it vividly for people to learn from others, because that's how you get ahead. That being said, like you said, there's sort of this culture now of this sort of, I suppose, slimy way of, like you said, positioning this as it was your original ideas. Like if you read the books, it was 50 years ago, we were saying pretty much the exact same thing. So I think there's a distinction to be there. There's a lot of marketing behind that and branding behind that could be sometimes disingenuous. One thing I want to talk to you about, Jeffrey, is this sort of concept of leadership at war speed, right? Because one thing that always fascinated me, and one of my the most fascinating basically conversation I ever had was when I sold basically the part of my first business. I had this great event company contacting me saying, "Hey Sam, we'd like to give you a stage. You can tell basically our audience about how you did and how you scaled and so on." So I went there, and it was this incredible billionaire in this case, which will recognize himself once he see this. And he sat me down. He had his assistant basically waiting for me on stage to say, "Hey, in this case, this billionaire, I'd love to have dinner with you." So we sat down together. And we talked extensively, and it was an amazing meeting. But it was really stretching a point that I always ask anyone which worked at high stake decision makings, which is I was asking him. He was basically an ex-veteran, and he served his country. And obviously, I have a lot of appreciation for people who does that with perhaps the proudness and also the love in their heart for others. And he sat me down and he said, and I asked him, "Hey, in times of wars, what perhaps makes you so, I suppose, so convinced that basically you'll be able to protect your fellow, basically your fellow teammates, and how that bonds basically come to happen?" And he looked at me and dead in the eyes and he said, "Sam, in the military, there's one rule that basically rules it all, and it is that I will defend you, basically your life, because I know you will defend mine." So when we have this mindset of accountability again, where basically the only way we win is that if we both win, that is a next level of understanding basically leadership and culture. And obviously, as someone that has worked like yourself with the Army National Guards and so many, again, military basically educator, I'm really interested for you to tell me what's the I suppose the through line between battlefield leaderships and boardroom leaderships, right? You work with some of the best CEO in the world. You were just referencing Richard Branson, which is one of my idol, and you work with some incredible military leaders also. What's the tread line between the two, and what do most people get wrong when trying to apply one to the other?
Great question. Wow, let's try to unpack that one. So when I'm working with military leaders, I'm working with entrepreneurs, business owners, C-suite senior leaders, next-gen leaders. I'm working with private equity firms and their money coming into an organization, merger acquisitions, their money coming in and out of organizations, all those spaces, working with board members over the decades. The thread that I would come back to when you talked about next level leadership, next level alignment, there are several answers. Number one, purpose. If you and I have a sense of purpose, and it's going in the same direction, maybe not to the exact same address, but it's in the same direction. You want to go to Toronto? I want to go to Toronto. Wow, let's share a car and get to Toronto. When we get there, we'll figure out who goes left and right. We have a sense of purpose. I've been on lots of airlines where the airline did not land at the airport that my ticket said I was going to because of weather issues or whatever. And you land somewhere else and you look around and you see 5 or 6 other people in the baggage claim and you all started saying, "Hey, you guys all want to, share a van. Let's get a rental van and let's go." You have a sense of purpose. Now, when you get to the other location, okay, we're going to drive to that other airport because that's where we were going to fly into, because we've already all predetermined once we got to that airport how we're going to go our own way. So part of it, of leadership and business people, is you have to have some sort of a macro sense of purpose. Where we get sidelined is we look at our micro purpose, or where I want to go, this address as an example is different than where Sam wants to go. And so we start debating and getting into a fight, versus back up and say, wait a second, do we even have a macro alignment in purpose or belief or goal or objective? Because if you don't have a macro, it's another conversation. From shut up, go another direction, to how do I try to find a way of connection? And that's a whole other conversation. But so the first is, I would say that's one. Second, alignment of egos. Again, male, female, two men, two women, whatever. Human beings have egos. So I think the other element I've learned in working is, what's the ego driver? So I'll use the military example. In time of war, you're right. We all have a general sense of purpose. We all want to come back home alive. So we have a reason to make sure we park any normal challenges we have amongst our egos to the side. But let's take war out of it for a second. In normal business environment, you're not at war. In normal military, you're not at war. But you keep that mentality. So war in a business might be, what happens if my largest customer fails to pay? How do I do payroll? How do I pay my bills? What happens if there's a disruption in the marketplace and two of my competitors decide to merge, and now it's one powerful force I'm playing against versus two little midgets in the market space? So there's a lot of ways you can say, well, what is war? What is it if I have a key player on my team that all of a sudden leaves today for whatever reason? So in the military, though, here's the anomaly. And it also happens sometimes in business. So if you're not a big military fan, please shut up and listen up anyway, because you will see the connection if you, for example, go on LinkedIn. I go on LinkedIn and I see someone who's had a job for 1 to 2 years, and then the next another 1 to 2 years, and the next 1 to 2 years. If I were talking to you for whatever reason, I would want to really hear, because there could be an exception to the rule. That's another phrase I love. But I would like to hear why that journey is there. Why every year or two are you leaving one employer and going to the other? Because more than likely, the reason is you suck. You're not great. You suck. Because here's the reality. If you were worth a damn, one of those employers would have worked really hard to have kept you. See, being a person who signed paychecks, I understand the other side of that from the employee side. If I have a great employee that's looking to leave, I want to find out why. You're leaving just solely for a paycheck. That's the only reason why you're leaving. Okay, wait a second. Let's look at that. Let's look at what's the value I'm missing in you, or the value I need you to bring to the table that could justify me raising your commission, or raising your paycheck, or raising your benefits package, or raising something, or giving you more flexibility, or et cetera, to give you a reason to say, oh my gosh, I want to stay here. See, a lot of times people don't realize this. I'm a life coach. Well, how are you a life coach? All you've learned is how to quit a job and how to interview and get the next, and how to quit a job and interview and get the next. Because in most organizations, the first year, you're learning the institutional knowledge sets. You're learning the industry. You're learning the company. You're learning where the heck the bathroom is. So you're really not going to be a massive contributor in year one. Now, again, exceptions. Yes, I'm not stupid. I've been around the block. But the norm is, in the first year, you're getting your feet on the ground. So if you're leaving it a year and a half, you're leaving it a year and a half because it's now time to actually produce what you sold someone on an interview you could do if you were hired, and you can't do it because either you're lazy, go back to my 56%, or you're pathetic, go back to my 15%, or you're great. Well, if you're great, you're not looking at leaving. You're talking to your supervisor about how to change something so that you can stay. So now back to the military. Now use that business one now, military. So in the United States, here's the fatal flaw today. 20 years ago, this might have made sense. 50 years ago, this might have made sense. But the United States military in our country hasn't changed its HR model in a freaking 100 years. So you come into a position as a non-commissioned officer, a soldier. You might be in that position. If you do a good job, you could be in that position basically your entire career. If you're an officer, they move you every 2, 3, 4 years. So you're going to get transferred or promoted every 2 or 3, 4 years out of the job you're in. So you might be in one business area, what is called in essence a company, a battalion, a brigade, a division, whatever. You're going to be working at some level or leading at some level for about 2 to 3 to 4 years. So if you're in a position for less than 1 year and you get transferred out of it, chances are either you are a phenomenal rock star and they need your help somewhere else, or the real truth is you're freaking worthless and no one has the guts to fire you and kick you out of the military. So they're just going to transfer you somewhere else so you can do less damage to where you are now. So in the military, the reason that we have these problems, to your question, is that we have egos, in case everyone forgot where Magee's going. So we don't have alignment of egos, and we have people that come in, and I have firsthand experienced this. I was working with one National Guard area, and I was helping that state in a very specific area that the 2 years before me, they were cratering. The year with me, they leveled off the crater, and they actually were turning it around and starting to come out of the hole. All the stats were there. So the team that made that happen, they were getting promoted and transferred out. New person came in. He walked up and says, "Where did you go to school?" I gave him the name. He goes, "I only talk to people that have gone to Ivy League schools." And turns and walks away. And I went, wow. And then the other two people that were there, the people that were, turning over to the next military leader, you could see their face of embarrassment. They apologized profusely, et cetera, et cetera. So I sent an email back to the boss's boss afterwards saying, this is not going to go good. You have a person in the slot because of ego and because of his resume that I don't believe is going to do anything good. And I would question whether or not the person's ever done anything good because he's a job hopper. Well, his 2 years as a position took what was coming up, leveled it, and he cratered it again. So how you in essence have to address it. So you have to have alignment of purpose, alignment of egos, alignment of values. There's another key on what are your values? So there are certain markers that you can look at and say, that person is going to be able to weather any bad storm and they're going to come out at the other end okay because they have a good GPS. They have a good inner sense of mettle and self of who they are. And people know it. I go back to that one military leader. It's like taking a little bowl at your kitchen table and having oil on it. You're having a nice Italian meal and you have some oil and you drop in essence a little piece of vinegar into it. It's going to oil and water. It's going to separate out. Sure. So with this military leader, it was exactly when I was on stage speaking and had 1,000+ people in a room. I noticed that when he sat down, it was like as soon as he sat, everyone kind of within a couple of minutes politely just moved and went and sat somewhere else. And was just like, oh yeah, there's Mr. Toxicity. And it happens in business. It happens everywhere. So alignment, purpose, values, egos, goals, destination. And I think we get too wrapped around the micro and we miss the whole macro because micro can distract people away from what really matters. That's the noise.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it definitely can be. You mentioned ego. It's one of my favorite concepts of all time comes from meditation, right? Marcus Aurelius, which talk about the ego debt, this concept that ego is the enemy.
Stop. Don't lose your thought. Jeff McGee's good at being the interrupter. Who is the name again?
Marcus Aurelius.
So for our listeners, one more time, what was the name again?
Marcus Aurelius.
I love a person who reads history. I just had to go back to that one, Samuel. That's one of the things I found fascinating about you. Again, you're never supposed to dissect by, ethnicity or gender or age. BS. The whole world's doing it 24/7 at warp speed. And so that's one of the things that's always fascinating about you. You're just a couple of days younger than I am, but you're a history fan. And so if anyone's not familiar with Marcus Aurelius, you need to put that one on your next reading list. All right, keep going. Where are you?
Oh, yeah, but Marcus, and by the way, meditation is one of these books that changed my life completely. And in my opinion, obviously the whole Stoic movements also come from this sort of epitome of ancient Greeks and so on, which I'm a big fan of, and the Romans, obviously. But when you think about it, was talking about ego debts, which I think is fascinating because I will have the pleasure to actually meet Dan Marta also later today. And Dan also talks about the fact that you need to destroy your ego in delegation and others also. And to me, that's what the fascinating part is. It's sort of this understanding of, I suppose, what we always talk about this sort of understanding that the market goes up and down, right? And actually people right now are quite concerned, and now there might be, a recession going down and World War III basically exploding. And I don't want to get too much into that, but there's a lot of insecurity that comes from this. But one concept that you talk a lot about, which I think is phenomenal because I personally fully agree with it, you said something along the lines of when market crash, what remains? Personal performance, to cite you directly. And you talk a lot about this concept of recession-proofing the performer, because at the end of the day, a leader, again, somebody in which can lead organization, leads a group, lead anything, is a performer, which is a person in which I always have this sort of picture in my mind of there's this the picture of the boss, which is behind his team telling them what to do. Then there's a picture of the leader being in front of their group and saying, hey, here's what we're going to do. And I'm going to be the first one basically on the front line, showing you guys what we got, how we can do it basically. There's a difference between that mindset. Now, from your perspective, what are the most recession resilient traits in a performer or a leader perhaps? And how can we make sure that we teach basically someone to build them under pressure when it counts the most? Because the truth is the world is unstable and probably always will be.
Great question. Critical thinking, resiliency, urgency, subject matter expert. You can create a quick list off the top of your head. AI is never going to replace those. Recession proofing yourself comes down to, again, understanding. If you go back and let's apply history to your question, every 10-ish years, what I've recognized, and we'll just use the last 100 years. You can take it backwards if you want, make it a fun little personal academic exercise. But about every 10 years, something massive happens in the global economy, the global market space, or in your own national market space. That's a major game changer, recalibrator to how everything is going to be seen, done, and looked at. So if we look at the time of this audio recording, we have basically COVID hit at 2020. So that was a game changer for a lot of people. If you back up 10 years to that, we had an economic recession in real estate space across North America. That means Canada, United States. So I'll just fixate on those two geographies for my reference. Then if you go back 10 years before that, you had 9/11. If you go 10 years back before that, you had the .com. I mean, so I realized it's kind of this phenomenon about every 10 years, we forget in essence what stupidity looks like, and we set ourselves up for the next one because we, in essence, we become complacent or relaxed. We let down our guard. We're not paying attention. I've written a lot about that. So again, you talk about what's going on in the marketplace today. Well, again, we're halfway into the next 10-year cycle if we do something. So if you talk about, and you brought it up, so I didn't, folks, so don't freak out, but you said World War III. If you think about that and analyze that and take politics out of the conversation, what you'll see is that for the last 40 years, this World War III conversation has been being built and being put into place because we didn't hold people accountable to do what was right the first time there was an opportunity to fix a problem. We said, okay, here was the crisis in essence from 40 years ago, it did this, and here's the one 30 years ago, and here's the one 20 years ago. So this whole issue of nuclear proliferation and potentially bad people getting it and what they've already publicly said they would do if they have it, well, you could have fixed that many times over without it ever escalating to where it is here. But again, people don't want to look at truth in the face because they realize their ego, you brought that one up a minute ago, so I love that whole concept. Our ego's getting away that we say, well, like my politic is perfect, yours is wrong. My family is perfect, yours is wrong. My boss is great, yours sucks. I mean, it's always one of those that my side of the equation is always right and yours is wrong. Well, sometimes that's not true. Maybe both of our sides need to be taken outside and cleaned up a little bit. So those elements. So how do you economically bulletproof? So then you brought in AI. That's our new one on the table. Everyone's freaking out. Well, AI, yes, is going to make a lot of positions irrelevant, but it's not going to eliminate organizations. And so AI is another tool that can help to make certain things more proficient, just like computers in general make things more proficient. Or heck, everyone who has a cell phone, grab your cell phone for a second. Because again, if you're over the age of 50, I guess it makes me the old person at the table, seems how you're not, Sam. If you're over 50, you can remember a time when cell phones didn't exist. And if you're over 40, you can remember a time cell phones didn't exist. Because in 1999, cell phones were not a norm on the planet, period. There's a little company, you'll like this one, Sam, called BlackBerry. They own the planet, but because they've had their head up their backside and weren't paying attention, next thing you know, Apple and Androids and everyone else, Nokia, everyone's coming into the marketplace and steals a chunk of it, and away they go. And so, BlackBerry, for all practical purpose, no longer exists, but they were, in essence, the pioneers that created everything we play with today. A friend of mine has an Apple. I have an Android. I save my pictures into folders. I asked him the other day, hey, do you have this in a folder? He goes, no, I don't really know how to do that. I'm going, are you freaking kidding me? Apple's a graphics company. That's how they got started. I mean, you got a phone and you can't find your pictures. I can find mine in a nanosecond. So again, and I'm not techie and he's not techie, which is my point. If you're an Apple techie person, maybe you know all the answers to that equation. So again, how you bulletproof yourself is, can you bring a sense of urgency that everything you do? That's the game changer right now today, Sam. I'm not saying crisis, anxiety, and panic, but a sense of urgency. People have been conditioned because of devices like this that we have instant information. Back to the word history. People don't read books or magazines because they want to click into Wikipedia because God knows that's the source of everything that makes sense. Thank you for buying a book. But whether it's an ebook, whether it's a digital book, whether it's an audio book or a hard book, again, who are the purveyors of real knowledge? So that's one of the ways that you're going to always be of value. I tell people that, again, if AI is coming into your space, think about it. 50% of what AI does is wrong. 50% of what AI does is problematic. 50% of what AI provides you is going to create more work at the other end, especially if it's in an information distribution space, because the largest place AI sources, ChatGPT sources, all of its information is from the open web, i.e. Wikipedia, i.e. that's 100% true. So again, if you're the subject matter expert, then you look at what it's saying, and then you can see, okay, yep, that is better than what I had, hit enter. Or you can go, no, we have to edit that a little bit. So that's one. Second is resiliency, the ability to recognize change. And this has been said before, but it's a reality. Change is the new reality. I mean, every day change is happening. What you've got to recognize is don't get stressed out. That's just the new reality. Change was happening before. You just were used to the pace and cadence of it. I wrote a book called Changeformational. Everyone needs to go get that book. It's a real fast, short, simple book. I wrote it during COVID when I started looking at all these businesses that were thriving in 2019 on the planet that in 2020 were all cratering, because they didn't know how to deal with the change. They didn't know how to deal with transformation. So I smashed the words together, giving everyone an idea, concept that, change is always happening. Your ability to recognize what do you bring to this equation that can be transformational, that you can present in the face of change, and that makes you transformational, and you'll win. See, typically human beings and businesses do like one transformation a year. It's like they got to get all psyched up for this transformation. On this date, we're going to flip the switch and convert something. Well, you got 9,000 other opportunities if you start looking at it differently. So change, again, as you talk about, referencing some different historical, signposts on the planet. But urgency is one, resiliency, being able to bounce back and realize, hey, that's the new you. And then you have to be able to realize what makes everything different. And to me, that comes back to talent, which is the beginning of the question. You cannot replace a human being right now. And I hope that we're not replaced in my lifetime. Because if that happens, every one of these crazy Hollywood movies are all going to be realized how life is going to change. And every one of those movies never end good. So there's your clue. So be careful what you ask for. You can say, I want to innovate. So we have a state in the United States called California. It's a great case study on complete lunacy lately.
Oh, yeah.
You want to see good people gone dumb, just look at anything going on in that state. So recently there was a person in their state legislature that thought that it made a lot of sense that we should raise by state law minimum wage to $50 an hour. Well, if you're going to start minimum wage at $50 an hour, a lot of businesses are going to go out of business. And guess what? In the past 24 months, a lot of businesses have went out of business for several reasons. And she or he is one of them. Because if you think about it, if I'm going to keep my hamburger restaurant open and I can't pay $50 an hour for basically unskilled labor, I'm going to look at technology then. And do I use technology to replace some of those labor intense jobs? Because there's still a reason for my product in this zip code. And if you do that, and you see a ton of technology coming into lots of market spaces because of that pushback. Well, when that happens, you either have to skill up your talent pool, love that one, or you have to remove some of that because it's no longer talent. It's wasted money and wasted labor. So again, last night on my flight, as I'm recording this, I'm flying in from New York City back to where I live here in Houston, Texas. And what's interesting is a gentleman sitting down next to me. He's an engineer. He has a son that's in his 20s and another son who's in his 30s. And as an engineer, he's talking about the trades that his kids are in. Well, certain jobs are never going to be replaced by AI in the foreseeable future. If you need someone to come fix your AC unit or your heater, that's a human touch. You need someone to come repair something in your house, on a wall, roof, ceiling, etc. That's a human touch. You need someone to come fix your pool pump. That's a human touch. You need someone to fix your car engine. They might connect it to some automated technology to do some diagnostics to tell them what to do, but that mechanic is going to have to take something off and put something in. So we have to just look at this. Again, great question. I could go on it forever, but it comes down to what really are you bringing? Back to the word legacy. What do you bring into the equation that only you uniquely can do that brings value to others, and for that you can get paid something? That's the clue of what the future is looking like.
Fantastic. Well, I want to finish like always with the future, that is, and you call the future leadership is modular. And this is very interesting. This is a sort of a new thought that I think is quite fantastic. So you talk about the fact that legacy leadership models are outdated and that people need basically scaffolding and not sermons, perhaps, which was something that was directly quoted from you once again. And perhaps what I'm talking about this is that with module programs like Leadership Mastery 1.0 and obviously to 3.0, which is you're right so much it doesn't even make sense. But and then the sales boot camp is basically 1.0 to 8.0, right? Because we got a lot of those as well. Obviously you really you're sort of building these like a Lego set, which I found so fascinating, and for executive developments, and not just for one, basically, I suppose, fit all. And this is what I think the future is, personally, with technology, is personalizations. We're gonna get to a point where technology is gonna be so low of a threshold to acquire that the true differences will be, like you said, talent. That will always be one, because without talent, like you said, nothing moves. But two will be the delivery. How excellence can be the delivery, but most importantly, how can we make it so personalized that the other person on the other end feels like they're the most special person on earth. Now, within that, and within how you structure leadership, basically as module programs, tell me more about why that is the future, and I suppose what's broken and how most companies train their top people today.
Great question. And we could spend all day sitting down with a cup of coffee and having this conversation. So real quickly for us and our viewers today. So there's an international trade association called SHRM, Society of Human Resource Managers. And it's a trade association for anyone in a business of scale that HR is what they do. So that's where you go. It's like, doctors have theirs and lawyers have theirs and engineers have theirs. And, every trade has a professional trade association. In it, they talk about how do you develop an individual. And so what I would add to that conversation is two things. And again, any of the viewers that are listening to this, if you want a copy of a diagram I've created that speaks to this, so I love this question because I can give you a very directed answer. Just email Sam or I, and we'll be more than happy to gift it to you. But to me, the answer is how you develop an individual and make it personalized is number one, chronology. What's the skill set or experiences someone has to have first in order for the next one to make sense? If I'm going to give you a recipe to a dish I love to cook, sukiyaki, that's an Asian dish, and I love to cook it in my wok, and there's a whole list of different ingredients that are, solid mass and liquid mass you put together. But if you don't put it together in the right chronological order, it will still come out looking the same, but it will taste dramatically different. So what's the chronology? And some people don't get that. I used that reference earlier that, hey, can you come in and talk to our executive team, the board, or do a training program on dealing with conflict and confrontation in the workplace? We have difficult, whatever they say next, I don't care. And I might say yes, but I might say, well, wait, let's back up. What sort of talent development are you doing for, just in general with your team, or what's your leadership programming look like? Because what I'm realizing is that need set, we still may talk to, but there are 4 or 5 other major skill sets someone should possess first before you ever talk about this topic. And if they possess those, then we probably shouldn't even be talking about this topic. The reason we're talking about this topic, if you have the skill sets, is because you haven't been applying those skill sets. So we need to go back and talk about why you've not been applying those. Or if you don't have them, then we need to give you so there's a chronology to this conversation. But most people have never really lived in the reality world. They've just been, trained to present someone else's IP. They've been certified to present someone else's IP. And that's the big issue with a lot of coaches and trainers and experts today, is they're not really experts. What they're an expert in is what someone taught them, because they've never really lived it or done it. When you're signing people's paychecks, it's a whole different conversation talking about engaging employees versus you've never signed a paycheck. When you talk about, in essence, making payroll and you're signing 100, 200, 300 in people's paychecks figuratively every 2 weeks, it's a different conversation. Understand accounts payable, accounts receivable, what's our value stream, what's the supply chain, how do we pay our bills, what's our terms? You have a whole other conversation. Well, a lot of people today have never done whatever it is they're talking about they do. So that's one. Then after chronology is the word pathology. How you build this developmental experience together, whether it's individual, whether it's cohort driven, whether it's on-site, off-site, whether it's hybrid, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're a parent, think about those 2 words, whether you realize them or not. If you're raising a pretty doggone good child, you realize, what do I need to do first, second, and third every day with this child? Or if I'm going to grow and develop them, again, if I want them to learn violin, then how do I go about doing that? Is it today, this week, this month, next year? And you want them also to learn piano. Is it, again, today, this week, next month, next year? And you want them to become, comfortable at playing soccer and baseball and swim team. So, you want a well-rounded child where you can say, you know what, until they turn 18, we're not going to give them a lot of choice to say no. We're going to give them choice to say yes more. And we're going to expose them to everything. Now what you've created is legacy and a well-balanced individual. Just a little tirade. Think about you and I. Do you play the piano?
Yes, a little bit.
Good. I said that on purpose because I knew you do a little bit, and I hate you for that. Here's why. Because every time Sam and I go to a meeting or a conference or facility, more often than not, there will be a piano in every major building out there. Sam can sit down, and he may only know really one song good, but he sits down and plays that one song. He is the absolute star of the room right now.
Right.
What can I do? I can clunk around and play chopsticks. Well, that's not very good. Everyone's going to laugh at me and my 3-year-old's learning that one. So again, you've got to understand the pathology and chronology. And so, again, I think what a lot of people don't put together is that process and that flow. And so to kind of wrap it up, that's how I look at what I do. Now, again, there's a lot of topics people might say, Jeff, can you help me with? It's not my space. I'm not going to open my mouth and prove I'm an idiot. What I may go say is, you know what, that's a great topic. And I know 3 great people that own that one. Let me introduce you to those people. So stay in your lane and quit putting yourself out there as better than who you are. Just stay in your lane and you'll be phenomenal.
Dr. Jeffrey Magee, thank you so much for this lovely conversations. Obviously, the best way to create the future, to predict the future, is to create it. And so we hold all the people accountable to that. It would be lovely if you could share some last words very quickly of wisdom with our audience, my friend.
Again, unleash the talent. That's my brand. That's my name. That's my known. Follow me on LinkedIn, Dr. Jeffrey Magee. Again, go to my website, jeffreymagee.com, for talent development ideas. Go to Professional Performance Magazine to see some of the phenomenal people that have written and shared their wisdom with me for our readers over the past 30 years. The wisdom is simple. You are exactly who you are. That sentence is a repeating sentence. And if you don't like who you are, then guess what? Change it. Change the people you interact with. Change what you read. Change what you eat. Change where you sleep. But you are who you are. You can't change what happened yesterday, but you can change what you're going to do right now.
Thank you for spending your time with us today on the Meaningful Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review or share it with someone who could benefit from it. And always remember, your story matters. Make it meaningful. We hope to see you next time.